What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk to you about SoFi. I want to go over some of the data points, break it down on what really moved it, and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure to hit that thumbs up. And with that, let's get right to it. So SoFi went down 0.61% today, 27.05 the low, 27.83 the high, and 65 million shares being traded. It is pulling a little bit lower as well after hours, currently down 0.94%. Reason why this is occurring is because they did put out a 8K, just signaling that the most recent S3 did close. So I don't really think that there's anything surprising about that, but maybe people are not satisfied based on this description of what they intend on using the net proceeds for. So as I mentioned, I think a couple of videos back, it most likely is going to be used for them to build a good moat, or as what they say, enhancing their capital position. But I think a lot of people were really wanting to hear some sort of acquisition. You see a lot of individuals on social media really speculating on what that might be. So you have SoFi Insider really kind of grasping at straws here, just really speculating to kind of a crazy level. But nonetheless, this is again what the market and what SoFi investors are really looking at, why they did this. So let me know your general thoughts on that. But in my opinion, might be unpopular opinion, this sell-off right here that's happening after hours, very unjustified. So if you're wanting a quick swing trade, it might be a good opportunity to potentially get in. But then again, SoFi's technicals, I think, are also pointing to a little bit more of a pull lower. Today, there really wasn't any macro data or anything like that, no speculative topics. So Trump kind of has been somewhat quiet, or at least avoiding a lot of the hot topics lately. So today, in my opinion, the reason why there was a certain level of suppression across the board, a lot of algorithmic trading was kind of pushing some stocks lower, was because of this. So I think generally we all know what's coming on December the 10th. That is the Fed decision rate. Even though right now there is a 87.2% likelihood of a 25 basis point cut, still, this is kind of the first time that we've actually gone this close to a meeting where it's not at 100% and where we don't actually have a true, actual, like 100% dedicated decision, if that kind of makes sense. So still with 87%, of course, consensus is that we will get that, but still there's a certain level of like, hey, well, might not. And I think this is what's causing the market to be a little bit jittery, right? Because you never know. Powell, even in the best case scenario, is somewhat difficult. So now, especially with the whole shutdown and all the lack of data for an kind of an extended period, he could easily just say, hey, you know what? We don't have enough data. We'll have to wait until the next one to make a sound decision. That's what the market is afraid is going to happen. And if that does happen, then you might see some crazy volatile days ahead. But nonetheless, this is why you did see a lot of stocks really get suppressed. In SoFi's case, though, you actually did see a lot of institutions buy. So this is why it's very misleading and why I always like to bring this up every video. Sometimes it's for the positive, sometimes it's for the negative, but for instance, right here, if someone just saw this, they'd figure that institutions were selling, right? Because SoFi ended up in the red. This is how powerful algorithmic trading is truly, because if we pop over to the secondary market, largest transaction was 96.4 million. Then you had 18 million. That one was a sell, but you had 14 million, 12.9, 12.9, 9.5, 5.4, 3.1, 3.07, blah, blah, blah. So you had a lot of big money actually buying SoFi up. This, again, shows how powerful algorithmic trading truly is. And I think that lately, over the last 6 months, whoever's been in control, so the market makers, have really stepped that up like crazy. So let me know your viewpoint on that. But nonetheless, big money was buying the SoFi dip. I know it probably doesn't look like that, but on the dark pool, these are some of the big transactions that did occur. Dark pool is a little bit more difficult to kind of just distinguish what is buys and what is sells. So it looks like there was one just done after hours, 27.8 million. And so based on that, it is fair to assume, especially at the price of 27.61, that most likely was kind of what kickstarted that sell off right here. So unfortunately, that was most likely a sell. Then you had 27 or 20.7, 20.7, 4.4. So a lot of big money was trading SoFi moral of the story. So aside from that, looking at shorts did return 570,000 shares, 10.12% of the free float is being shorted, works out to be 118.37 million shares overall being shorted. So definitely interesting to see. They kind of broke their trend a little bit because the last several trading days, so from this teal line right here, they've been really increasing. So today they're kind of breaking their trend, which is good. It does, if you think about it, does signal that today's red day wasn't really justified. That's how I interpret this, at least. So let me know your viewpoint on that. Looking at the options, we did see very low volume. So 42 million in calls, 13 million in puts, for a grand total of 55.6. So that's one thing also happening behind the scenes, is that lower and lower volume is starting to plague SoFi's options. 47% of all the options being done were bearish in nature. And I always like to kind of educate as best as possible. I know I generally go over the same type of data. Just so you're aware, when I'm saying 47%, that is the largest. So there is a group right here that's kind of categorized as bearish, neutral, and bullish. Neutral means that you had one very large entity that just took out the bid and the ask. So they pretty much were the only one for that strike. And so essentially, a lot of platforms can't figure out whether that is a bullish or a bearish trade. So that's why, again, I kind of bring up where the consensus is. So 47% was the consensus. So a little bit on a side note there. And then over here, you do see from a bull standpoint, still a lot of optimism for it to be roughly between that $29 and $30 range. Bears are anticipating for it to be sub kind of 25 to 26 for the most part. So that is a very, very accurate representation of the market sentiment right now. So it's all going to come down to Powell, whether he decides to screw over the market by not cutting, or again, you could have him say that, hey, we're going to cut this time around, but going forward, don't anticipate anything. That's also something that Besant got in the market's mind, that we will be having a cut in December as well as January. Definitely, I feel like that was very premature to kind of mention that, but still, once someone says that, the market's like, cool, let's go. That's awesome. Let's price that in. So yeah, it's going to be a very volatile week overall. But aside from that, with it closing at 27.61, it is trading between these 2 points, so this R1 and the pivot. So 27.55 is a strong support, so kind of pushing a little bit lower than that so far during the after hours. So tomorrow, just watch for 27.16 and then 26.73. Aside from all of that though, technically, if you do see a nice recovery, 27.93 and then 28.16 is going to be potentially on the table. So let me know your general thoughts on that. And then last but not least, quickly popping over here, it is still somewhat in no man's land between the 50 and also 100-day moving average. So Powell most likely is going to either push SoFi to the 100-day moving average or be enough to break it past that 50-day moving average. We'll kind of just have to wait and see how that does play out, but there really hasn't been any new analyst ratings, no articles, nothing along those lines. Looking at the market position, you do see a lot more willing buyers around that $27 range, which kind of was the low for today. So all SoFi needs is a nice little push. That is it. And enough to kind of at that stage get it to around that mid $28 range could be easily done. So let me know your general thoughts on SoFi. I know I've stated this in the past. It's very difficult to catch the bottoms as well as the peaks. Best thing that you can do is just dollar cost average. And if you're like myself, and if you don't want to just dollar cost average, you can do kind of a new hybrid or whatever version of it by using options, and you can sell puts. That way gets you the ideal price that you want, gets you also additional premiums. I personally see that as a win-win. So if anyone out there is doing and selling puts, give yourself a shout out as well. But hopefully everyone's having a good rest of the day. And then one final thing, pop over to my Patreon if you're looking for some solid buy signals on stocks, options, crypto. Put out daily day trades, numerous swing trades. Worthwhile to pop over there and check that out. So link to that is in the description below and also the comments. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.